Show, where tonight we are honored and privileged to have the WNBA championship coach, Mike Thibault, on the Greg Herenda Show. Mike, welcome to FDU.
Great to see you. I'm well familiar with your place. My daughter played in your conference at Monmouth when she played in college, so made many trips there.
Absolutely. Well, that's good to know. And I know your connection was my connection to get you on the show is your daughter. It's a family affair. Your daughter played at Monmouth for Stephanie Gately and Coach Ange. And tell me about that connection between Monmouth, yourself, Fairleigh Dickinson. I know you went to a Howard game this year.
Yeah, I've known Coach Ange since since my daughter Carly went through the recruiting process, and so they were her coaches her first 2 years at Monmouth, and they left to go to Fordham. Tried to convince Carly to go, but I think she just couldn't stand the thought of doing a redshirt year and not playing. So it worked out great for everybody. She stayed at Monmouth, was a good player there, and so I've kept in contact with Coach Ange and Coach Gately ever since, and got a chance to watch them play at Fordham. And then when Angie took over at FDU, I made sure I got a chance to come and see them play when they came to DC this year. So we've kept the connection going for years now. Absolutely.
And Coach Ange, you know, the Howard game was a difficult game, but you probably followed what a great year it turned into. They played a home conference game. They won that game, and then their season got ended kind of shortly.
Yeah, she was really feeling the toughness of losing all those close games early. And basically I said to her, hey, look, this is what you were signed up for. When you take over a job, there's a reason the job is open, and there's things that have to be fixed, and you know the right way to go about it. Just stick to your gut feeling about what your team needs and how you go about it. And eventually it'll turn the corner, which it did. In fact, shortly after that Howard game, they got on a little bit of a roll. And, that's as you know, the big thing about coaching. If you know the things you're doing are the right way to do it, you have to have patience. If you don't, there's an old saying, if you listen to the fans and the media, you're very much closer to sitting with them.
That's a great, great line, man. And I don't know even where to start with you, because in doing my research, there's so much success that's followed. You've either followed it or it has followed you. But I want to go back first to the genesis of your coaching beginnings. Like, when you were a kid, did you grow up loving the game, playing the game, and thinking you were going to be a coach? Describe Mike or Coach Thibault at like 11 or 12, or what kind of a kid, where were you there, and how did you evolve to where you sit today?
I was one of those kids that played every sport, and I probably thought baseball was my best sport, going into high school anyway. I loved baseball, but somewhere in the high school range, baseball got boring to me and basketball stayed exciting. And, but I was a mediocre player. I wasn't a great player. I played in a really good high school team. Play is a relative word. Watched a lot for a very good high school program in California. And my senior year, I got hurt, and I torn the ligaments in my ankle, and they told me I probably wouldn't play till the end of the season, if at all. And I was probably moping around and thinking, this is it. And luckily, at our school, we had 2 freshman teams. And the varsity coach, I think, was probably tired of me moping and wanted to get me, doing something positive. And he asked me if I would help be an assistant coach for one of the freshman teams. So I said, why not, And about halfway through the season, the guy who was the head coach of the team I was with quit. He had something come up. And they let me coach the team the rest of the year, and got some faculty representative to sit on the bench, so they had an adult. And I coached a high school team at the age of 17. But that didn't give me the total bug. I mean, I went off to college thinking I'm not going to, do this. I was going to actually, I started college as a music major, and I was going to be a rock star, and another secure profession like coaching,
I love it.
They asked me if I wanted to walk on for basketball. I think they just wanted another practice body. And I said, no, I felt like I knew my playing days. I was going to be one of those 20-20-20 players where you play when you're up 20, down 20, or there's 20 seconds left. So I really didn't think about it. And then about a year into college, I got asked to come back and coach at actually at a rival high school to help coach. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And that's where I kind of fell in love with the coaching bug. I started working camps in the summer, worked Coach Wooden's camps and other camps around California. And it just kind of, it hit me. So I switched majors, going to be an English major and be a high school coach. And that was my aspiration. I had no idea of anything beyond high school coaching, but that was going to be good enough for me to be a teacher and a coach.
Sure. And I think, as you well know, right now with the Mystics, you still are a teacher and
Yep.
a coach. But tell me about, like, your resume makes sense, except for the fact that, like, your first paid job, to my knowledge, was like coaching professional. Like, after high school, did you go right to the NBA? That's the way.
No. So what I did was I was a high school assistant coach, and I went to another high school in Santa Cruz, California, and was the JV coach and assistant varsity coach under Pete Newell Jr. And while I was there, I got offered a junior college assistant job on the West Coast. And after coaching there for a year, I was offered a small college assistant job up in Lacey, Washington, at St. Martin's College, where I went and finished my English degree and got a chance to coach on the college level. But
Right.
I had known the Laker assistants at the time, Jack McCloskey and Stan Albeck, and they asked me to start scouting opponents for them when they came to Portland and Seattle. And so St. Martin's was about halfway in between, and I started doing a lot of scouting. And then Jerry West quit as the coach, and they brought in Jack McKinney, who had been, a Philly 5 coach, and he had Paul Westhead as his assistant. And I got a chance to meet Paul and just offered, I said, hey, I know you got your all new staff, but if you need anybody to scout, I'd be glad to do it. He and I went out to dinner one night in Seattle and met. And about 3 weeks later, Jack McKinney had his horrible bicycle accident. And missed the rest of the season, and Paul Westhead took over as the coach. So I was 28 going on 29, I guess, or just 29. And I did all their West Coast scouting for the playoffs that year for the 80 championship year. And so their Western Conference playoffs, I was their advanced scout, and they ended up beating the Sixers in the finals that year, Magic's rookie year.
Oh, yeah.
And later that summer, I was hired as a full-time assistant in the NBA at the age of 29. And so, it's kind of one of those ones, you pay your dues a little bit, right place at the right time, having done your homework. And they saw something that, impressed them enough to give me a full-time job. So they made me an assistant coach and director of player personnel. The old NBA days, you didn't have these staffs of, 7 assistants and scouting people. I did both. And that's the way the whole league was at that time.
That's an incredible story, because you coached at a lot of really, really small places in Minnesota and California, all over. And then the next thing you know, you're coaching the Lakers. Did you find, in scouting for the Lakers, did you find the game that much different in those days? Or how did you make that transformation mentally and professionally?
I think it helped me that I made the steps as I went along, to see the differences at each level. That there's a difference when you go from high school to college and when you go from college to the pros. But I don't think I would have been prepared at all for an assistant job in the NBA had I not scouted for those couple years, done advanced scouting and really studied teams and how they played. And, when you're sitting on the floor and you're scouting a team, you get to see how the personalities work and how coaches think. So, a lot of times when you're scouting teams, you're scouting, play sets and everything else, but I always scout other teams' coaches. I want to know, like if you put a gun to their head, what are they about? What will they do at crunch time? What will they do when they need to do something? And I think that really helped me prepare to go into the NBA. The biggest, I kind of wow moment for me was not the players. I mean, you're walking into a staff and you're seeing Kareem and Magic and those guys, but I had been around them enough during the playoffs to have a little bit of a relationship. But I thought it was interesting that, guys like Kareem, a few others were older than me. I mean, here I was, the youngest assistant in the NBA, and Kareem's about 3.5 years older than me. And that you find out that all players want from coaches is two things. I think they want you to be honest with them, and that they can trust what you say is what you mean, and it's going to help them. And they want to be, all the great players want to be coached. They want somebody that can help them be better. And if I can help them do something better, then I'm important. If I can't help them and I'm not going to make them better, I'm not much use to them. And so, it was refreshing to me to have somebody like Kareem come to me and say, okay, help me with the scouting report. I'm going to play against so-and-so. Tell me everything about him. And I think that helps you build a relationship, and it builds a trust that a coach has.
It's so true. And you've coached some of the great, you mentioned Kareem and Magic. And now in contemporary days, you have to talk about The Last Dance and Stan Albeck and not letting Michael play those last 7 or 14 seconds. I mean, what could you share with us about being, right in that huddle with MJ?
I mean, the first thing is that, because I had a dual role as an assistant coach and a director of player personnel, I was basically in charge of the draft. Rod Thorne was the GM, and he made the final decision, but he gave me a lot of input on what to do. So when we drafted Michael, it seems like a no-brainer thing right now, but as people have seen in the Last Dance, had we been the team with the first pick, we wouldn't have taken Michael. We would have taken Elijah one, just like Houston did.
Sure.
The big debate is, I know that Rod and I, if we had the second pick, we weren't taking Sam Bowie. We were taking Michael Jordan. But we had people in the organization who wanted us to change, who wanted us to trade up or trade down. And Rod and I basically made a pact that we weren't giving into that. We have people suggest, and this is for older school people, they suggested we trade down and take somebody like Mel Turpin, just because they wanted us to take a center. And luckily for the Bulls and for us, we held steady to what we wanted. But the other thing about Michael that I knew from watching him in college is that you were drafting somebody that was an unbelievable competitor on an everyday basis. There are great players who can turn it on and turn it off. There was no off switch for Michael. Every contest, every sprint, he wanted to win. And if we were going to turn around the Bulls franchise, that was what we had to do. Now you related that whole story about the time limit. That was one of the craziest moments in all my time in the NBA. We had this minute limit on, and there was a game actually before the one they talk about on there where we had a sub at the table for Mike, and the action didn't stop. And it was late game, and it was, I want to say it was a 1 or 2 point game, and he went over his limit by about 30 seconds, I think. And it was kind of our moment of, as we walked into the locker room after the game, our ownership group and Jerry Krause followed us in. And behind closed doors, we got our butts reamed. Like, if that ever happens again, you'll all lose your job. Right. And like, what were we supposed to do? The only thing we could have done was taken a foul, and it was the bonus, and we would put the other team at the line to tie or take the lead. And so, but it was, that's how crazy, that stuff you've seen in the documentary, that's all true. That was the tension around that whole situation. And Michael, was fighting them tooth and nail, and we were just trying to fight for our lives as coaches, just trying to manage the whole situation.
Absolutely. Your time with that group, was it as crazy, like just off the floor, just getting into an arena and out of arena for Michael and Scotty and well, Scotty wasn't there then.
Yeah, he wasn't there when I was there. So he came the year after I left. It just had started, kind of the Michael craze, about the middle of his rookie year. And I remember a situation, we were in New York, and it's cold outside, and it was, before, the buses went underground and everything else. We literally, the team got on and off the bus on the corner of 8th Avenue and
33rd.
34. There you go. And we were, you went in the press elevator to go into the locker room. And so walked through a cordon of fans coming out. So we come out, and it's a middle winter, December or January, and it's about 30 degrees outside. And Michael patiently sits there and stands there and signs autographs for like 30 minutes. And everybody else on the team is on the bus waiting. Right. And finally, our security guy says, "Hey, we got to go. Team's waiting." and fans weren't happy. There were ones that he still hadn't signed for, and he had signed in freezing weather for 30 minutes. So we get on the bus, and fans are yelling, and they start shaking the bus and beating on the bus. So right then and there was the decision was made. You know what? We can't keep doing this every night. The team bus is going to leave, and Michael's going to get a private, car to get him back with security to the hotel.
That makes sense. Yep.
Because there was just no way. And that was kind of the start of all the security around him. He was just, kind of that it had kicked in as to who he was. Obviously after that, it just built and built. But the amount of time that was asked of him and the media requests and the fan requests, it's overwhelming. And, I know when fans want autographs, you're in a bubble sometimes. You don't realize that you're one of, thousands that want the same thing. And he was so good with his time and everything else, but it just wears on you after a bit.
Mike, you then go to the Omaha Racers in the CBA. How did you make that transition from the Bulls to the CBA? Was that part of the Phil Jackson, like the Jerry Krause?
No, not at all. In fact, it had nothing to do with it. It's interesting. So when I left the Bulls, Jerry Krause had fired Stan Albeck and I right after we had lost to Boston in that famous series where Michael had 60. Jerry wanted a college type. He couldn't understand that, we played 4 games in 6 days on the road, why we didn't come back and have a 3-hour college type practice. And Stan's trying to explain to him that, we couldn't even stand up. So I actually took a coaching job for a year in the middle of that. After I left the Bulls, I went and coached. There was the old 6'4" and under league, the World Basketball League. There were teams in the U.S. and Canada. I coached the first year of that league in Calgary, Canada, and was doing that. And then a new ownership group bought it, and I had some ownership equity in it, and they bought us out. And there was a new owner who was a season ticket holder with the Clippers who bought this Omaha team in the old CBA. He had bought the Rochester, Minnesota team and moved it to Omaha, Nebraska. And the guy asked me if I was interested in coaching, and I went and met with him. And I have friends in the CBA, but it was interesting. Phil Jackson took my place as an assistant in Chicago when I left. So we never had any direct coaching against each other at that time. But, he had just left the CBA to go to the NBA, and I left the NBA to go to the CBA. And my contemporaries were George Karl and Flip Saunders and Bill Eric Musselman. So those were the coaching names in the old CBA at that time.
And those went on to become like legendary, tremendous, great NBA head coaches. You won the CBA in your first year. Is that correct?
A couple of years in, actually. We got to the conference final, but we won it. We went back to the playoffs or to the finals, but we won it in '93. So
I don't want to go over every year, Mike, because we'll be here for a while. But tell me about your championship culture. That you're talking Lakers, you're talking Bulls, the CBA championship. Now the WNBA championship. There's a reason. There's a championship pedigree that you've developed. Tell me how you formed it. How does it work? Just from the grassroots up.
I think it starts way back to where we started at the beginning, back in high school coaching. And by that, I mean learning the little details. When I took the job while I was in college, the guy I worked for, a guy by the name of Tom Cassane, taught me the importance of preparation and scouting and, having a philosophy and trying to set up a daily habit program for your players and for yourself. And then my mentor kind of in all of that was Coach Wooden, being on the West Coast and working his camps all the time. That really, there's a coach who was one of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. And every year he started the season the same way with just basic fundamentals. And I think that was a big thing for me that I've taken all along, is that no matter what you think about the game, it comes down to players and fundamentals. If you don't have good players, you're not going to win. If you don't have good players that buy into the basics of the game and the fundamentals, to be unselfish about passing or to understand the team defensive concepts and all of those things, that it doesn't really matter what else you do. You have to have those things first. So I think my culture from that standpoint started that far back. I just felt that was the every year you could have that sound basis behind everything else you did. And then I think I learned from watching other coaches, NBA coaches, college coaches, that you have to be yourself. You can't try to emulate or be somebody else. You have to have your own personality in the game. And I think my years in Omaha and the CBA were like my own personal coaching lab. I had been an assistant in the NBA. I'd seen other people do things, but now it was an opportunity for 8 years to be me and try things. And it was, you weren't in front of, 20,000 fans every night. You were in front of 3,000 or 4,000. And so you could do the things that you thought you needed to try as a coach. And I think a lot of my development of philosophy had to do with, here's what I believe in. Let's see if I'm right. And try things. And I was lucky enough to coach, guys who wanted to get to the NBA. That was the development league, just like the G League is now. And so seeing players get to the NBA by how we taught them and what we did was rewarding, and yet and it was reassuring that maybe the things we were doing were the right things to do. And so I've kind of maintained that philosophy even when I went back to the NBA as an assistant, and when I came in the WNBA, is that there are just things that every championship team has and cultures. And I think as a coach, the last part of it is you have to be honest with your players. You don't have to be loved by your players all the time, but you got to be honest, and they respect you for that. And I think that was a big thing for me, is that my players know I will tell them the truth. Sometimes they don't want to hear it, but I will tell them what I think is good for them. But I also involve players. I think the last part is you involve players in some of the decision making. For us, I constantly have my veteran players in on major decisions, whether it's a trade or it's how we're going to practice or whether we need a day off or what we're going to do about a travel thing, and let them be a part of the process, because I don't ever think you have the best version of your team until your best players are your best leaders and best workers.
Amen. It's funny. This morning in preparation, I watched the end of your championship game, then listened to every single player that they interviewed live. And one of your players, I'm not sure it was, that she said that coach makes me look at myself for what I am and makes me try to get better every single day. And that's why we're here today. When your players say what you're saying and believe in what you're saying, then that synergy that's a championship formula. So it's really good to hear your players say that on top of you saying it here on the show.
If I say it enough times to them, maybe it just, it sinks in at some point.
Yes.
But I think you just need a buy-in like that. I constantly said to them that you have to be who you are. I'm not going to have you be something different. I'm going to try to get you better. But our other mantra was that we didn't look too far ahead to anything, but our goal was that every day we walked in the gym, our goal was to be a little bit better when we walked out than when we walked in. And, you're not going to improve 10 things all at one time. You're not going to get by leaps and bounds better. But if you can get a little bit better every day at something, and every player on your team does that,
yes,
it's amazing what the cumulative effect is of that.
Mike, you kind of jumped in front of me. The transition to women's professional basketball. Now, that moment, was it a phone call or a reach out on your part, on someone else's part? Do you remember that moment where you said, what?
Well, it started with Terry Stotts and I getting fired in Milwaukee when we were on George Karl's staff. We had a find out about some philosophical things, some things that happened in the year before. There was a trade made that kind of ruined our chemistry in Milwaukee that both Terry and I had opposed. We didn't want to bring in Anthony Mason. We wanted to keep Scott Williams. There's some other mitigating factors, but when that came out, I had, scouting job offers right away in the NBA, and I did that part-time while I was kind of sorting things out. But I had friends that were coaching in the WNBA, and they all said you'd really love it. And I kind of wanted to go back to being a head coach again and see what that was like. And that wasn't in the cards probably for me in the NBA. I was going to be a lifetime assistant, unless you're an assistant coach where your buddy's the head coach and they get fired and you're the interim coach. And that wasn't a path I was going to, consciously choose. And so, and my daughter at the time was just starting to play. I think she was maybe 5th grade. We were in Milwaukee and she was saying, "Hey, Dad, we need coaches on the women's side." So I got a phone call about a job in Portland. There was a team in the WNBA called the Portland Fire. It was owned by Paul Allen, who owned the Trailblazers. And so I met with them and agreed to take the job. And about 2 weeks before the press conference, and we were already looking at houses, he decided to pull the plug on the team. And it was like, oh, Lord, now where am I going? But luckily the team in Connecticut had just been bought. They brought a team from Orlando up, and they called me and Jerry West and Jeff Van Gundy and some others, reached out to them. And so I went and met with them, and it just kind of clicked. And so I figured, you know what, I'll try this, see if the WNBA is what I want. If I don't, and I get a job offer back in the NBA, I can always make that choice to go back. I've had 5 offers to go back and never taken it. I've loved what I'm doing. I like being a head coach. I like thinking that I can have some sort of impact on the women's game. My daughter grew up in that environment and has now become a college coach. My son is on my coaching staff. And I found out by accident that because the WNBA plays in the summer, I actually get to have a real family life during the regular part of my kids growing up. So I got to watch them play in high school and, see their music and their sports and all those things that I didn't even know was going to be a side benefit. And if I'd stayed in the NBA, I would have missed out on some of that.
I mean, so you're getting the best of every world. And the thing that really not startled me, but the WNBA season's 34 games. Now, the NBA season's 82.
A marathon.
I mean, do the math, right? So, every game in the WNBA is arguably 2.5 times more valuable than one game. So these games in the WNBA, the NBA, you coached it. There's some games, Milwaukee, you in Milwaukee, you're going to play, I don't know, you're playing whatever, Atlanta in front of 8,000 people, and it's about all the gamblers.
In the middle of January, too, when people are only thinking about the All-Star game.
Right. So, the WNBA is a totally different dynamic, and I think it's, put in a perfect place, and it was obviously put in a perfect place for you.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, it's one of those things by happenstance turned out to be one of the best things that's happened in my life. I miss the NBA at times just because, you're talking about the playoff intensity in an NBA arena is unmatched. I mean, it's an incredible situation. But ours became that in our league now. I mean, our finals and the atmosphere we had, you couldn't ask for better. I'm coaching the best women athletes in the world. At the highest level, I have a couple of the best players in the whole world on my team. And so it's been a godsend for me. I mean, I've loved every minute of it.
On your roster right now, Coach, Elena, Delle on the team still?
Yep.
And Tina Charles?
We just traded for Tina Charles. Yep, about 2 weeks
ago. Let me explain. You might now have some.
And to stop you, Emma Mieseman on our team was the MVP of the finals. So
the more I watch Emma, I mean, you have the triangle right there. I mean, how you're probably figuring it out right now there in your kitchen, how to figure out how to share the ball and Emma, to me, I watched her play. Her game, speaks for itself. I've been to Belgium, so when I heard she was from Belgium, I was like, okay, I really like this woman. And then you hear her interviewed, and her players are telling her that the year before they had to make her and scream at her to shoot the ball. It just seems like you have very unselfish culture, but you've got arguably three of the great, Lisa Leslie and Taurasi. But, I mean, you have 3 of the best players in the league on your team. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Tina's a new one for us, and we're going to have to figure a few things out. But luckily, you have someone like Elena Delle who is willing to sacrifice a little bit just to make it work. She's a more natural four, but our big lineup that we played last year with her at the three was really successful for us, and she's bought into it. And, before we even made the trade for Tina, I went to Elena and said, okay, here's what has to happen if we do this. And she said, I'm all in, coach. We want to keep winning. We want to be the champs, and, let's do what we got to do. And so that's the culture, luckily, that we have now with our team. And it works.
Oh, my God, does it ever. I was the head coach at Cabrini College, small little Catholic school.
Where it is.
In Radnor, Pennsylvania. And I'll never forget this. I was taking a recruit for a tour, and there was a girls AAU tournament, and everyone told me that this girl from Delaware, you have to see her play. And I took the recruit, and we went up to the balcony up top where she was playing, and you didn't have to look for 30 seconds. She was 6'4", long, but she passed it, shot it, and you could just, she had bird qualities, you know? And it was just really cool to see, when you've done it, and I've done it to a certain extent, when you see these players before they become who they are, and you hear the story about her, you talk about sharing with her sister.
Yep.
It just grabs your heart. And tell me, I'm sure there's a lot of really good emotions in women's basketball, but just tell me, in your estimation, the difference between, coaching professional men and coaching professional women, if there is any difference.
There aren't a lot. There's obvious physical differences in that, somebody like Elena Delle who is 6'5", would be a big guard in the NBA, and she's a 4 in our league essentially. Right. And so you're not drawing up plays for lob dunks and those kinds of things. There's some physical things that are different. Right. Most women players, if they get trapped in the corner, are not going to jump their way out of trouble. Right. But the other stuff is basically coached the same, and it helps that we now play. We didn't when I first came in the league, but we play basically with NBA rules. We play with the 24-second clock and the illegal defense and the 8 seconds to get it across, and all those things are the same. And actually, the NBA has taken a few of our rules that we instituted first and has added them to the NBA game. From the emotional side, I kid that there are some differences. If I told my players today that next Monday we're going to do something and I didn't do it, I would get quizzed by 10 of them like, hey, you said last, Wednesday at 11 a.m. that, we're going to do this. NBA guys might just say, hey, coach forgot. Or they may not have remembered that I said it, on last Wednesday.
Yes.
I think all good teams want to be a family. They want that feeling, men or women. But I think it's really important in the women's game. I think that, wanting to have it feel like a family every day, especially because you play a little bit shorter season and, not as many of them have families yet with little kids. Some do in our league, but, so their team for those 34 games, those 4.5 months, it really is their family. And I think that creating that atmosphere is really important. And so I think that's, I've been conscious of that when I came in the league.
Do you think they listen better and just take it in more, or are they just totally locked in? I see the eyes on.
Yeah. I think on good teams, you have that all the time. I think the difference is we have less distractions in the sense on and off the court. I think that, in the NBA, you have so many off court things going on with people in players' ears and, groups of people around them. Money has changed it. I think if our players made the same kind of money as the NBA guys, we might see it be a little bit different. I think just because, you have these other things tugging at you. I think our players, as a general rule, the majority of them have gone to 4 years of college. So they're already, when they come to our league, more grown up. They're closer to being what I would call adult basketball players. The NBA, a lot of the young players that come in, they're really great players, but you're drafting them on potential. They haven't experienced life the way that other people have who are older. It's just a fact that, I have to keep reminding myself, how young many of these NBA guys are. They're 20 years old. And I try to think back how I was when I was 20. And, if I was a knucklehead, and you have to kind of remember those things. We want them, because they make money and because they have fame, we want to make them into something that they really aren't yet. And I just think that's a big difference in our league.
Just for our viewers, and if you don't want to answer the question, what is the minimum salary in the WNBA? Do you know that?
Yeah, $57,000. So if you came in as a low first round or second round pick, that's what you would make. Or if you were a free agent player, the top end salary now is $215 plus the ability to make other money off the court in marketing, things. Theoretically, there are a couple players in our league that could make about $500,000 now with particular marketing deals. Those aren't all in effect yet with the new collective bargaining agreement. And since we're on hold to playing right now, that won't probably work itself out for another year or so. But the difference now is that our best players can make more of what's equitable.
My assistant coach, or my director of basketball operations, Darius Stokes' sister is Kia Stokes.
Right.
And Kia was great. She's been around the team. She's been on my radio show. But she would go play I believe she was in Turkey. So what contractually, not real, you don't have to get into it too much, but they're allowed to go play for other teams when they're not contracted to the WNBA?
Right. So because we play from basically May to the end of September, or if you're into the finals, you're into October. But most of our players that want to make more money can go play from October till April in Europe. And, everybody goes, how come they make more money in Europe? Some do, some don't. The difference is that in the United States, most of the people in our league are trying to be business people. They're trying to do it with a business model that keeps them from losing money. Some of the big teams in Europe, they pay more because their teams are vanity projects for owners. They can't quite afford to own a men's team, or they just want to be a big fish in their town. So you'll have people instead of spending money on a yacht or whatever, they're going to buy a women's basketball team and sit in the front row, and in their town, they're the owner of a team. And so you have some players who make more money playing overseas than they do here. But it's not a great business model. It's just, but luckily for our players, it's an opportunity for them to go make some other money too. The only difference is that they got to play year round and they don't get much of a break.
My time is running out, but I'm a basketball, neck junkie. I grew up, I played basketball in high school in Jersey City and Hudson County, where the Hurleys are, and your family. And we'll talk about Nancy at the end, but you have a family affair, just like the Hurleys, just like my family. My grandfather played professional basketball, baseball, and my mother and my brother won a national championship. So it's all about, family. But my second to last question, the great players that play in the WNBA or played, the Lisa Leslies, the Diana Taurasis, the Delle, my favorite player by far is Taurasi. Because I think she could probably, out of all of them, I think she could play in the NBA just on a toughness level. Now, this is just my personal opinion. I just love
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I love her, just her swag, her grit. She just thinks she's the best. I think the emblem now is the WA emblem. Is there discrepancy on who that is? That's her. That's got to be her.
I don't think it is, but I think it's a combination. Some people think it's Tamika Catchings. Some think it's a combination of them. My son posed the question the other day, are you looking at him from the back or from the front? Depends on which way they're going to the basket. So I don't know. I think it's a combination of several of the great players.
Tell me about Taurasi, though. Now, did you coach? I
coached her in USA basketball.
That's right. You're tight with Donne Showalter out. Absolutely, yes.
Diana, first of all, when she was in college, I was first starting in Connecticut in the WNBA. She was still in college. She would come and work out with our team in the spring before we started. And she and my son were always masked up against each other, and they would talk trash to each other. And if she was like Michael in that regard, you could be playing a pickup game till 11, and she'd trash talk her way all the way through it. So she's very confident. You know, she as a freshman in college decided at Tennessee that it was worth punching the Tennessee logo on the backboard stand in front of 18,000 people in Tennessee. So that's how she approaches the game. But she is an ultimate competitor, and coaching her in USA basketball was an absolute treat. I mean, that's been one of the great things about coaching the WNBA is the USA basketball part has allowed me to coach the other great players in the league. Leslie and Catchings and Sue Bird and Taurasi and Tina Thompson, all those, just to have a greater understanding of the mindset of the best players in our league. I'm spoiled in that regard, having seen all of those people up close.
Talking about your family, Eric and Carly and your wife, Nancy, and you have a great cystic fibrosis foundation that you guys still, I think you started it back in Nebraska. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, the foundation was there. That was just part of I grew up, I had 5 siblings pass away from cystic fibrosis. So over the course of our years, in each stop, we've been involved with, that foundation. Haven't connected as well here in DC for some reason, but in Nebraska and Milwaukee and Connecticut, it's been a big part of what we do. It's part of my family history.
Sure.
But, we do so much as a family on a lot of things together.
And Nancy must be like, she's gone to so many basketball games. It's got to be, she's got to be going directly. She's got that express train. Is that true or false?
Probably. She played in high school and knows the game. She and some of the officials have running battles in our league. But she went into the medical profession. She always laments that she couldn't convince anybody in our family to do that. And I said, well, you didn't make it interesting enough. They only saw my side of things. So, I kind of tried to talk both of my kids briefly out of doing what they do, but you could tell it was in their blood. They grew up in that environment and they love it.
Hey, Mike, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time. I have one request. If you can get me Diana Taurasi on my show or any mystic, I'd love to have him on.
Well, if you have Taurasi on your show, you better get your bleep thing ready. So, you get your sensors got to be ready to go.
Well, this is aired in New York and New Jersey, so it'll fit right in. But listen, good luck next year. I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but you got 3 of the best players in the game. I know they're going to want you to do it again. And if anybody can do it, I know you can. And you're a great ambassador, not only for the women's game, but the men's game. Bruce Hamburger says hello. And there's a lot of people doing my research that say only great things about you. And you came through with flying colors, man. You're a good man.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it a lot. And good luck to get going again when you guys get started. You've had
hopefully
a great run up there. So
I appreciate it. Hopefully both of our teams will be on the court and we'll be safe and healthy. But we'll pray for that. But I thank you again, and I thank Coach Ange for making this connection. And it was really special for me, and I'm sure our listeners out there learned a heck of a lot from you today.
Appreciate it, Greg. Thanks.
All right, man. You be good.
Yep. See you.
And that will end the Greg Herenda Show. Another incredible guest and story. We thank you. You stay safe and healthy and be well. And we'll see you next Wednesday for our Greg Herenda Chat with Greatness. Peace.